Good evening, Gardeners. This is Dr. Zayat, and this is Zoom session 5, and it is going to be a wild and crazy session. Dr. Whitaker and I met today, and I have been working on this section and going through chapter 5, and there's just so much. First of all, there's so much in chapter 5. And then, and so many court cases that we could talk about. But that's just a small piece of tonight, because you also have your case study coming up, and you've never done a case study before. So I felt like you needed some guidance and expectation on that. And then also, we started looking at the rate the OMAs are coming in. I feel like many of you are going to be ready for the skip. We were going to introduce it next week, but here's what we decided to do. I'm going to introduce it tonight, because if we wait till next week, then we introduce it and bam, you have to start working. The skip is really something I need to introduce you to it, and then you need to go away and read the rubric and look at it and think about your situation in your school and all of that, and then come back next week if you have. We could kind of briefly go over it with Dr. Whitaker, and then you can answer your questions if you have any questions. But I don't want to just wait till next week and hit you with it, and then you immediately have to start working on it. So, and since you've got the case study coming up and everything else, so I decided, about 3 o'clock, that the best way to present all of this to you was to share my screen with you and do it in a PowerPoint. So you could actually, instead of looking at me, you could see what I'm talking about. But and so what I'll do is try to stop after each section. I'm doing a section on chapter 5. I'll do a section on due process, a section on case study, a section on the OMA briefly, and then the skip. And so at the end of each of those sessions, I'll stop and see if you have any questions. The only thing I ask is that on the skip, you not get too in-depth or technical about it until you've had a chance to look at the rubric. Because what I find most of the time is when people have a hard time with an artifact, it's because we didn't spend enough time on the rubric with you. And we don't usually do that because we just don't have enough time. So just be sure before you start it that you're going to look at that very carefully. And the reason I stress that is because the skip is, you're going to use a lot of it next semester when you do your last artifact. I just want to see a couple of smiles there. Last artifact, SIAP, next semester. And so a lot of the work you're doing this semester, part of the OMA, part of the skip, will be used in that. Okay, so let's get started. Does anybody have anything before I get started? Okay. All right, so I will share my screen with you. And we jump right in. So this is, we're going to start with case study 3. And case study 3 is a really bad, the way that it's done in PowerPoint. I don't know who copied it in there. I mean, not in PowerPoint, but in Blackboard. So I've actually copied and pasted another copy for you, and I'll be sending that out to you. See, I'm making myself a note, handouts. I'm going to send out the case study article to you in a separate handout that I've done. Okay, so you're going to get into your Zoom Teams, and you are going to create a presentation no longer than 15 minutes, and you're going to respond to the following bullets. You're going to respond to, would you consider Mary Lou's comments a veiled threat? Secondly, how should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy Hudson? Number 3, should Mary Lou allow Jimmy and Willie to attend the prom as a couple? And then the final one is cite how you would address or minimize bullying and cyberbullying. So those are the things you're going to address. So first of all, your presentation is going to be for 15 minutes. There's 3 groups. If we do 15 minutes a group, that's 45 minutes. And it will just be my class with me and Dr. Whitaker's class with her. And this will be on the 26th. The second thing is each member of the Zoom team must participate in the presentation. So you can't just work on it together and have one person present it. Each of you has to actually participate in the presentation. Now, if you can't come to the Zoom session on 2/26, you'll have to figure out a way to, you can videotape yourself, do a video clip, and embed that in whatever your presentation is going to be, or give that to somebody to share. But, or if you can be at the end and not at the beginning, I could put you at the end of the agenda. But that's something that you and your group need to work out. But each of you will be required to actually participate in the presentation, not just the preparation, but the presentation as well. Most important thing is this is based on facts. And it's supported by law. So be really careful to stay away from the words, I think I would, or I think I should, because you're actually in charge. And so you're making a decision as this is in real time. This is what I would do, this is the action I would take, and I'm doing that based on this court case, or I'm doing that based on this law, or I'm doing that based on my school board policy 355, XL 355. So for your sections, you will use your you'll use your school board policy book, your school handbook, and there's several of you working on it together, so you may have different rules in different books, so you'll have to agree. And look strongly at your school board policy, and then there's state law, there's federal law. But it can't be just, I think, I believe, or I would probably. These are definitive answers, and they are based in fact, which comes from previous court cases, or from law. Now, what we're going to talk about in Chapter 5 is exactly what you are about to run into, and that is for every court case that rules in favor of the student, there's probably another one somewhere that rules in favor of the school. And so, you know, it becomes very murky or gray. But just like last week, do you remember us talking about certain things, and we kept reading that what they're looking for is to see if you took reasonable care. You know, that's what they're gonna decide it by, is if you gave reasonable care. So it's the same thing with this. They are, you know, these laws and things, you're gonna do like what, you're gonna pick one, and then you're going with that, and you're gonna give the facts that you chose that decision or that case.
Dr. Zine, there is a question there in the chat. It's just wanting to know if, it says, I know we are doing this case study tonight, so will we be presenting the same case study? Just making sure she's clear. I just wanted to let you clarify. I just typed back that it is the same.
Everybody will be doing the same one. It is case study 3. And we're all presenting the same night. And that's why each group will have 15 minutes. So Dr. Zayon's group will have, we'll do ours together. And Dr. Whitaker's group, you'll do yours together. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
All right. So, but I just can't stress enough. It's not your thoughts. It's not your opinion. It's cited based on fact, law, school board policy, school rules. And then the final thing is that after the presentation, after we're offline, after we go away, would be the best time, but if not, then the next day, because it's going to be due right away. You're to sit down and write a half a page individually, each individual. And you're going to write a half a page to my students to me and Dr. Whitaker's to her. And you're going to write about the process. And it's a safe reflection between you and your instructor. So if the process was hard because you had somebody in your group that didn't do their research, you can state that. You don't have to state who, but just state whatever it was about the process, that the plus, the minus, and overall how you felt about it. Do you feel like it gave you a taste of what you're going to be up against when you're in that big chair, and or what you would have preferred, if anything could have done differently, what you would have liked, but mainly just the process. How did it feel to have to make a decision, and how did it feel to have to support that decision when you had conflicting reports, conflicting cases, and so forth? Okay. Any other questions about the case study?
I think we're all okay.
Good deal. All right, so we're gonna head over to chapter 5, students.
Hey, actually, wait just 1 second.
Yeah.
Tamara has one.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you wanted us to use court cases and school board policy. I was thinking in terms of, are you thinking just landmark court cases or actual cases that maybe our district may be in litigation with, or are those not considered viable?
No, it's anything you choose. It doesn't have to be something that I've presented to you. It can be something you're experiencing in your own school. It can be some, maybe you've had something in your district, particularly about the cyberbullying, or with the prom. Maybe you've actually experienced something like that, and your school board has a specific policy. Well, you can state that policy, and then if you have an opportunity to talk to a school board member or to talk to a principal and find out the background of that policy, that might be interesting too. The good thing about these assignments are it gives you an opportunity to ask questions to people that you may not feel comfortable just calling up and say, oh, hey, could I talk to you about so-and-so? But if you have a school assignment and you need to talk to an assistant superintendent, director of student services, or a school board member, this gives you that opportunity. But good question. No, it does not have to be a landmark case. There is not a specific case. And there is not a right answer either. I don't have a rubric basing it on that says you had to pick this, this, and this. No. Anybody else?
Looks like we're okay.
Good clarification. All right, so students' rights. So just let's do thumbs up, thumbs down, because I can see your thumbs best of all. Give me a thumbs up if you felt like this chapter made you feel better, and a thumbs down if it made it a little bit murkier. I'm with you on the thumbs down. Gosh, I've taught this class over a year, and I have read chapter 5 in detail. I couldn't tell you how many times. I've taught it. I've taken notes on it. I've been in deep discussions with other principals and professors about it. And I'm still, just like you, every time I read something, I come up with a new, oh, what about this? Or what about that? So we're going to kind of address what you do with that ambiguity too. Okay, so in your book, you come away with it that pretty much the students' free speech rights are protected by the Constitution based on 2 cases, and one is Gitlow versus New York, and that is the clear and present danger clause there, and the other one is Tinker. The Tinker case is fascinating to me because the Tinker case happened during my time. So she and I were about the same age. And, you know, that was a time when people were just starting to find their voice and find out that it's okay not to do what you're told. I can remember having a sit-in because girls weren't allowed to wear pants to school. You know, and that was a huge deal then. And so it's, you know, Tinker's case was really a landmark case. And the reason that it was such a big deal is because basically the school acted out of fear. And let this be your lesson. They didn't act out of bringing in people and checking things out. And really, they acted out of fear. They heard that these people were getting together and making these black armbands, and that they were going to have a big rebellion against the Vietnam War, big protest. And because they were afraid of how people might respond to that, they shut it down, and they made a rule that they couldn't do it. They blocked it. Now, where they messed up is, I think they really messed up, is that so the kids came on to school, they saw them coming, they made the rule before the kids got there and told them, if you wear those armbands to school, you're going to be suspended. But they wore them anyway. 2 of them did. The 2 Tinker kids wore theirs. And, no, not Tinker, the other 2 wore theirs, I think. No, Tinker wore hers, Edgar didn't. And he's the one whose house it was at that they made the decision. He didn't wear his the first day, but he did wear it the second day. He kept it on all day long, and nothing happened. Nobody said anything. And at the end of school, they called him in, and they suspended him. Now, based on what you've learned so far, what was the big deal about that? What do you think the big deal was? Why did that? What?
They waited too long.
Why did they wait? I mean, what difference does it make if they waited too long? What was the big deal about that?
Because it's being passive and considering that it was, they're not really addressing the issue, you know, not being proactive, you know, and it kind of goes against the school. It wouldn't look good in court.
Exactly.
Well, it obviously wasn't causing a disruption, because had it caused a disruption, they would have had to deal with it earlier. So
Right.
if it wasn't bothering anybody, there was really no reason to suspend them.
Exactly. Lori, you're exactly right. And Chris, the thing is, if they had acted, if it had been causing a disruption, just like you said, they would have had to react immediately. But they didn't, like Lori said, there was no problem with it. And so at the end of the day, it was like, oh, well, we made this rule, so we're going to have to enforce it.
Right.
That was the deal. Y'all are exactly right. The big deal was that there was no disruption. And so that's why Tinker is such a big deal, and that's why we measure things against that. Because basically, what the court came back and said is, you can't take away somebody's freedom of speech because you think it might offend somebody or cause a problem. You have to be pretty darn sure that it is going to interfere and completely disrupt your school day before you before you take away that right. So that's why Tinker is great. Now, today I watched a lot of little videos because that was one of the things I wanted to share with you, but we got too much stuff. But if you ever have some spare time, I don't know when that would be, but go to YouTube and look up Tinker. And there's some little 5-minute, a lot of little 5-minute videos on YouTube where people have done projects and they show Tinker. She is now actually going around and teaching about the freedom of speech to kids and youth groups all around the country. But it's really neat. It has pictures of her and everything. So I just find things like that interesting and make it real. But those are your two to remember with that. In your book, it's divided into sections. And the reason that we're not going to break it down and break it apart is because, like I said, you're going to read one case and it tells you this. You're going to read another case. It figures it that way. There in between it all lies the truth. Who's going to decide that truth? That's what I'm going to talk about when we get through the chapter. At the end of the chapter, I'm going to explain to you what your challenge is. So anyway, it divides it into, first of all, items that students wear, how they dress, their hairstyles, physical gestures, school mascots, gang-related regalia and gang behaviors, particularly cults and Satanism. And those are things that you really have to stay on top of. And they change. Then it goes into oral written expression. And this is like a school newspaper or a speech, something like that. And usually there's a lot that they will rule in favor of the school if it's anything that's lewd or sexual overtones or that sort of thing. They talk a lot about like social decency and the basic rules of society. That school does have a responsibility to teach about those things. So we get by in some, with some of the cases with that. Then there's a section on students' rights related to privacy as far as search and seizure. And this one, we don't really give you a whole lot of facts on this one because districts have different ways of doing it. And this is the one that if you mess up, you're going to wind up in court. So you want to make sure you get this one right. So you don't want to, you want to read everything that you can, read all the examples in your textbook, but at the end, I'm going to tell you how you're going to come up with an understanding of when to do these things. The main thing that you have to be careful of is your system will have rules about when you can release student records and when you have to release student records. And the thing with drug testing, that's a really slippery slope when you start talking about drug testing staff, drug testing students, and you have to have a pretty good reason to do those things. So to take away, before a court's going to support you taking away their right. So for that reason, these are usually things that are decided on by the district. So the one thing is, as far as like a backpack or something, if you suspect that there's something illegal in a backpack or a firearm or whatever, you can search that based on your suspicion or hearsay or somebody on the bus said they saw it. But if the police is present, you can't. So that puts it in a whole different thing. There's one sort of set of rules. If it's you and you're in charge of the school, then it's more like what we talked about last week about not being negligent. You're trying to anticipate the safety of your students. But then when police gets involved, then it becomes more of a legal search, and they can't do that. They don't have the right to do it just because they think there might be something, but we can.
So if you're going to search a backpack, but let's say somebody said, so-and-so has a gun in their backpack. And so you say, okay, so you don't take your school resource officer with you to search it.
That is something that your system will tell you. You ask your system will decide, because different ones decide it different ways. But once the school resource officer is involved, it becomes a different procedure than if just the principal. But now, really, would you want to open a backpack that has a gun in it? So that's what I'm saying. These are things that you don't want to make that decision, because here's the thing: if you do the wrong thing, then who's going to have to bail you out? Not literally, but where you're going to have to get legal counsel, and you're not going to pay for that. Your system's going to pay for that. So anytime I was involved in anything like this, I asked first. And several times I had things that involved staff, and several times we actually, we had a great school attorney, and we actually would have to get a session with the school attorney and do a conference call where, whatever that is, for $150 a minute or whatever it is, for them to advise you how to act through something. And even then, there's no guarantee. And then there's students' rights for their freedom of assembly. And this is like the sit-ins and the things like that. The things that is so troubling about sit-ins is because, I went to high school in the 70s, and we had quite a few riots during our high school. People assumed they were racially motivated, but actually most of them weren't. They were motivated over us being forced to do something we didn't want to do. I was in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and at the last, 2 weeks before school started, all of a sudden half of the school is picked up and moved over here, the other half's moved over there. So it was more over things like that. And so ours started as peaceful sit-ins, but by the end of it, it was a physical, dangerous, where people were hurt and mobile units were ripped apart, and all kinds of things, and lots of violence. So that's why the freedom of assembly is such a big deal, because on the one hand, from Tinker, you learned you can't just, you can't base your decision on you think there might be a problem. You have to be pretty sure that the opportunity to disrupt the school day is going to be there. So having to sit in at lunch during the lunchtime is probably going to disrupt your school day, so you can, but again, I'm going to hit on how you make those decisions. So Gardner-Webb has a council of superintendents from all the areas that we serve. Just kind of a random sampling, and they get together every now and then, and they talk about what they want us to teach you. And so Dr. Lamb and Dr. Bull and that group are constantly asking superintendents, what do you wish new principals knew? What is it that we're not teaching them that we should be teaching them? And you know what the number one thing they all come back with is? They need to know when to ask. You know, so often they are so conscientious about doing the right thing and doing a good job and being, having confidence. You, the superintendent, having confidence in me, a principal. Nobody wants to appear weak, right? But at the same time, sometimes these things that we aren't asking can wind up in the front page of the news. And so you don't have necessarily, unless I've never known of a system where you have on your speed dial a school attorney, but I do know of systems, that system level, that has them. And it starts with sometimes like the director of student services, and then you contact that person, and then that person contacts the attorney, and then so forth. If it's a human resource issue, if it's a staff issue, same thing. You go through human resources and through that department and that director, and they seek legal counsel. The other thing is, I live at Surfside Beach. The things in my community that are going to be hot items that I might make a decision on that are going to get me in trouble are not necessarily the ones that are going to be the hot items if you're in Wake County, in Raleigh. Your community, your situations, everything that surrounds your school, what's going on at the time is going to have a big effect on it. But what you're going to find is that your school boards, the policies that they've made were not made lightly. And before those policies were voted on and created, they had legal counsel, they thought about it, and they consulted lots of different groups within your community and advisory boards before they made certain rules or certain policies. Now, sometimes they still pick the wrong one, and then it'll end up in court. But the main thing is that that's what you really need to be focused on and know about, is what is in your student handbook, what is in your school board policy handbook. One of the things that I did before I met my whole staff in a staff meeting for the first time is I went through the staff handbook, because I didn't write it. The principal before me wrote it. I went through the staff handbook, and everything that was in the staff handbook, I aligned it to school board. Because what I found was there were things that teachers have been complaining about, like the procedure for requesting to take personal leave, or something about the field trip policy. There were things that they complained about, and they were angry with their principal, but nobody realized that that rule was there because it was connected to school board. Same thing with parents. And so, if somebody's going to be angry at me, I wanted them to be angry at me for something I said or I did. And believe me, there will be plenty of stupid things that I do and say that people can get upset about. But I don't want to take on the heat for somebody else's controversial decisions. And so I aligned my school handbook and my staff handbook to the school board policies. And it was beautiful. Parents quit complaining about half of the things that they've been complaining about, because it wasn't my rule, it was a school board policy. And I couldn't go against the school board policy. I didn't want to lose my job. So, pass the buck, I guess. But I looked at it like the more I knew, the better prepared I was to avert an issue. to keep an issue from being flared up, to keep a rebellion from happening. So I just think information and communication are huge, really huge. And remember that right now you're looking at the lens of some of these things from a classroom teacher's perspective. And some things may not seem so dangerous or threatening, but if you're looking at them from a high school principal's perspective or an elementary principal's perspective, those are totally different lens that you're looking at. So I think that is going to, we're going to hit on due process too while we're there. So basically, due process is when people have been accused of breaking a law or harming someone else, they have a right to tell their side of the story. That's due process. And when punishment occurs, it needs to fit the crime, and it needs to be the same no matter who the person is. And the punishment can't just be arbitrary or capricious. It has to be in relation to what the crime was. But mainly due process is giving them a chance to tell their side of the story. Now, okay, so you have a student that's done something, you're going to suspend them, you go through due process, you contact the parents, you give them a chance to go through this school trial or whatever, tell their side. That's one thing. But one time, after everybody left, after the transportation people left, after the superintendent left, I was the only person, I'm sure, in the entire county that was still at work. I got a call from a parent about another student who did something on the bus, and I honestly can't remember what it was. But whatever it was they had threatened somebody or whatever it was, I felt like I could not allow that student to get on the bus tomorrow morning because of what had occurred. But I didn't have a chance. I couldn't call everybody together and go through due process. So in that case, there is another thing called summarily suspension, a summarily suspension. And that means that this is like an emergency kind of thing. The situation is critical. I'm not 100% sure you're guilty, but I've got enough evidence that there's an issue here that I can't allow you to get on that bus tomorrow. So I'm suspending you from that bus, and then we're going to have the hearing. And basically, if I'm wrong, I'll apologize to you. But if I'm right, then we're going to extend that suspension. That is something that you don't want to do unless you know how your school system, how they feel on that. But that would be a great conversation to have with your principal. What I did in that case was I went to the church of the assistant superintendent for his family night and interrupted him and explained my situation because I'd only been a principal about 6 months. And he explained to me that I had the right to do that. But my second problem was that the family that I was trying to get in touch with to tell them their student couldn't get on the bus didn't have a phone, of course. So I also had to get up the next morning and be at their doorstep at 6:30 before the bus stop ever became an issue. And so because of where it was, who it was, and what it was about, I took the school resource officer with me to make that visit, and in the dark at 6:30, and it all worked out just fine. And yes, I was in the right. And it was a good thing that I did it. And by doing that, let's just, if that, whatever the situation was, I can't remember if it was a threat that I think it was a threat the student had made, but made a threat with enough physical response to it, you know, that the person it was made to and all the people around believed it would happen. So I don't think a weapon was involved. That would have made it easier. But anyway, and the great thing about our buses, I guess yours too, we had video. So I love bus video. I watched I probably watched more bus video in my life than I have Netflix. But they're really good to watch. So anyway, so that hits you with that. And the main thing is that when you say due process, usually what comes to mind is, oh, that's EC. EC is very important. That's federal law you're dealing with. So you better be sure that you've got due process in place with anything that deals with the federal law. But due process is just as important in other areas also. Okay, so we only got about 15 minutes left to hit the skip. Any immediate questions? Basically, the answer that I'm going to give you about everything is it all depends. But I'll give it to you with a smile. It all depends. And that's what your director of student services, that's what your assistant superintendent, and that's what they're going to, it all depends. But gee, when you read chapter 5, you get it. It all depends, right? Okay. So this is just a quick, and I'm going to send this PowerPoint out to you as soon as I can find out how to write across the front of it draft, because like I said, I threw it together this afternoon when I was going through all the notes of everything I was trying to share with you, but I can't be 100% sure there's not a mistake in there. So you don't want somebody thinking I don't know how to spell or have a grammatical error. I don't want it out there published unless I have draft on it. Anyway, so these are your dates. The main thing is if you look down towards the bottom where I have like when your peer reviews are due, I put a date on those. That is not a date set in stone, but one of the things that I'm finding, and Dr. Whitaker is too, that some of our folks are not getting their they're not getting their artifacts posted in time for the people who need to do the reviews to do them and get that peer review uploaded and be in time. So, so neither of us that I know of have taken any points off for them being late, but it really bogs down the process. And, you know, she and I just wanted to remind you too that these dates are not because she and I like to sit around and, you know, just be big about, oh, turn it into me. These are because we have really, really worked on this timeline. And if you don't get things in by this timeline and the skip that's coming up, I don't see how you'll get everything done in time. That's what this is all about. That's what the due dates are about. And mainly,
Dr. C, it says it goes from 224, the OMA 3 and 4 due to instructor, to 218.
Yeah, well, see, that's what I'm talking about. That's one of those things I was talking about.
Is that supposed to be the 28th?
So let's see, what would that one be? It's due to the yes. The reason that's there is because that should be the 23rd, right?
Well, I had it on my calendar originally for March 3rd was when it was due to turn it in.
Okay, see, here's the problem, and I'll just take that date off and then, oh, sorry. Oops, back. Which one was it? Look at this one. Does that look right? No.
Or actually, I guess I had March 3rd. It was due to task stream. I didn't
Yeah,
actually.
see, that was the problem. That's what I was trying to look
I
at.
got you. Okay.
And that's the problem. Here we go. I'm getting close. Okay, see, that's the problem. You didn't have a date of when to turn it into your coach. And you didn't have a date of when to turn it into your peers. And so I was sitting here trying to do the math today, you know. And after, in fact, I won't send this out till in the morning because I'll go over it again in the morning. But here's the thing. You have to get it to Danny and run it through Turnitin before you can turn it into TaskStream. Once you turn it into TaskStream, they get 2 days to grade it and get it back to you. And then you can immediately take a screenshot and send it to me and Dr. Whitaker, right? But you can't wait and turn it into Danny and me at the same time because I can't grade you on it until it's gone through Turnitin. I mean, you can't turn it into TaskStream before it's gone through Turnitin. Does anybody not understand about Turnitin? Okay, so you have to finish it, put it all together, get it to Danny through Turnitin. He gets that score. He gives that score to you along with telling you to go ahead and send it to TaskStream. 2 days later, you get a grade or a score, or they send it back to you telling you what needs to be fixed. And then once that takes place, then you take a screenshot and you give it to us. Okay, so I'll look at that timeline a little again, but go by the dates on your calendar. But the ones that I added are things that aren't really in your calendar, but just know you got to go back and sort of figure out yourself when you can put those in. But Sarah and I'll take a look at that in the morning, okay?
There's a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Is it mandatory to submit to the coach for review?
Yes, it is.
And let's see, do we get grades for each part or is there just an overall score?
You get a grade for each part.
That's it.
And the other thing that's something is not quite right. Blackboard's having a little issue, but for example, Amber, I'm going to use you as an example. Amber posted her OMA for me. It had been, the coach had looked at it, the peer review had been done, it was ready for me. I graded it. I gave her comments. I went back to my grade book the next 2 hours later, and Amber's was there for me to grade. When I opened it up, it wasn't just Amber's, but underneath it was the review of the person who did Amber's peer review. And so I had to grade it again. So, but it's not going into your grade book. It's just, so I'm just saying if something shows up and it looks like it hasn't been graded, look at where you actually have the grades because that's where it should be. And I'm going back periodically to check it and make sure that it's there. So, but if you see anything that doesn't look right, let me know. Okay, or if you feel like something has been hanging on there a while. Now, she and I are both a little bit overwhelmed right now with grading because everything came in at the same. Usually they're staggered, but all of our interns that are candidates are seniors. And so all their work has to come in 3 weeks early this time. So all of their artifacts and all of yours were dumped in our grading box the same day. So we're working through it, but should have them all caught up by tomorrow, hopefully. All right, anything else before we hit the skip?
Yes, what are we supposed to do if our peer reviewer doesn't review it before it is due?
Okay, so send me a message. If you're in my class, send me the message. If you're in Dr. Whitaker's class, send her the message. If you have somebody else in your group that would be kind enough to do it for you, that's usually what people do. These sorts of situations that you're working with in your Zoom groups are exactly what it's going to be like when you work with a team of administrators. And it is just as uncomfortable to tell the principal of the other elementary school that, gosh, you didn't get your part of that report in on time, and therefore it's going to be late to the superintendent. So school C and I have to figure out how to get that part done. So anyway, that's why they started doing peer reviews, is to give you that opportunity to deal these sticky situations. But at the same time, you don't have time to get into it too big. So let us know what's happening. Okay? But most of you have been really good to help each other out with that. Okay. 8 minutes with the skip. We're going over it again next week, and you'll have this to look at it too. But basically, the skip is the stakeholder community involvement plan, and there's 4 parts to it. There's 3 parts, and then 4 is the reflection. Now, the good news is that it starts off with a needs assessment. But you can use the teacher working condition survey if you're in North Carolina, and you can use a thing called the climate analysis if you are in South Carolina. And so you will be using those instead of having to start from scratch and make a whole needs assessment up from the beginning. So it has a needs assessment, a resource identification part, a marketing plan, and then the details of it and your reflection at the end. So let's look at just number 1. This is how you're going to start. So you're going to start with the needs assessment. North Carolina uses teacher working condition survey. South Carolina uses a climate analysis. And you're looking at those to see, you're looking at very specific areas of it, and it will direct you that in the directions and in the rubric, everything. You'll get more specific instructions. I'm just trying to give you an overview so you can get it in your head what this looks like, this process. So you're going to be looking at where the gaps are, and then you're going to try to figure out how to fill the gaps. So where are the gaps in communication in what the people inside the building think and say, as opposed to outside the building? So inside, we feel like we're doing a great job with communication. We're really doing well with parents. Outside, the parents are saying, they never let us know anything. They never communicate with us. So that's kind of the types of things you'll be looking at. Once you figure out where your problem areas are, then you're going to do some short-term goals, and you'll have to have a committee to do this with. You have some short-term goals. Short-term goals are things like, well, we're going to start using Twitter. We're going to do an Instagram account. We're going to do a Facebook page. We're going to have somebody monitor the teachers' websites to make sure that they are keeping their web page current. You will not believe, because I sit here and look through my students' web pages and the ones that I'm Coach 1 to when I visit. This is January. I just finished a round of visits in schools, and 3 out of 7 of the schools I visited had the staff listed from last year still. So those are the kinds of things you're going to be looking at. Do you have problems like that in your school? Because everybody's so busy, who realizes that, oh, there's a ball I dropped and I didn't even know it. So it's not that anybody intentionally sits back and says, I just don't want to do that.
The students are asking, will you be sending out this PowerPoint?
Yes, I will. After I either edit it in the morning or I find a way to put draft across it tonight. Okay. All right. So, so short-term goals are basically things of communication between the people inside the building, internal, context, text, and external, which is out-term. Then you're going to have some long-term goals. Long-term goals are like, well, first grade is going to have a family math night and explain our new math curriculum and have math games that parents can make to take home. Third grade is going to have an EOG night, and they're going to talk about testing and some of the things that parents should be aware of with that. Those are your long-term things. And then there's a second prompt in there, and that prompt is analyzing the leadership in your school, which comes right off of the teacher working condition survey or the climate analysis. And what you'll probably do is you'll want to take part of that and you'll make a short survey and maybe send that out to your staff, or you might use the Title I survey from last year. It just kind of depends on what you're looking at. But you're going to do a climate analysis, and you're going to find out, wow, I thought we did a great job getting our message out there, but I find that parents really had no idea that we were so open to their input. Or they really don't know where to find curriculum resources, that sort of thing. So that's what one is. The focus is student achievement. You're looking at the needs assessment, which you already have the data probably done in one of those reports. And then you're going to look at what the gaps are in what you should be doing and what you are doing. And then you're going to come up with some short-term goals to fix those and some long-term goals to fix those. So it's pretty straightforward. The second part, you're going to take what you did in number one, your recommendations basically, and you're going to put them in a timeline. So it's going to start in May of this year. We're going to start this, and then September of next year, and so forth. So have a timeline of how you're going to implement this market plan. And then you're going to list the fiscal and human resources that you're going to use or need to carry out this timeline. So for example, it doesn't do any good for you to create a plan and put in that plan that we're going to do some kind of communication through iPads if your parents don't have iPads at home. So, so you have to show in this part that you have the people and the finances to make these things happen. You can't just sit back and dream up short-term goals and long-term goals that are off the top. They have to be goals that you can actually implement. So you're going to have to know specifics, like, is there money in the budget that we can serve refreshments at these family night things we do? Can we raffle off a bicycle? Because I can promise you this, you raffle off a bicycle, you will never have so many parents at a parent night. Are you going to feed them supper? Are you going to do it right after school and feed them supper? And so where's that money coming from? And all those things you have to specifically put down. You may not know exactly how much it's going to cost, but you need to go ahead and make a grasp at a figure. And then you're going to put it together in a plan, a marketing plan. You're going to have now's when you're going to start feeling like, oh my gosh, I just said that. But I just put that in 2. I just put that in 1. I just put that information in the OMA. Because you're even going to go back and get information out of the OMA. So, you are going to start at this point of your career at Gardner-Webb feeling like everything is so redundant. We call that alignment. And you will be doing that as a principal for the rest of your life. You will be doing the Title I report, the state report, the principal's report, the superintendent's report, and all of them are asking the same thing. They just want you to give it to them in a little bit different way. So, so if you feel like you're repeating yourself, you'll be doing the right thing. And so you're going to include the needs assessment, the organizational analysis, the resource identification, which is the money and the stuff. And then you're going to have statements in there about the strengths of your current program, what you're doing to enhance that, and how you're going to come out with a better image in the community based on this plan that you're going to implement. So you got the SIP team, climate analysis or needs assessment, looking at that. You're going to use part of the OMA. You're going to use these great handouts that I have for you that are basically outlines of what you need to do and what you need to include and what headings you should have, or you can make it hard and make them up yourself. Again, the climate analysis will be used, the OMA will be used, and you'll come out with a plan for completing each section. And that, in a nutshell, is the skip. And I'm 2 minutes over, so I'm sorry. All right, so if anybody wants to go, bye, have a good night. Thanks for coming. If anybody has a burning question, without getting too technical, I'll try to answer it. Wow. We're good, Amber? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. No questions.
Well, that sounds awful. Well, I'm gonna stop the share and go back. Wow, there's just so many more of you when I look at this view. When I looked at the view that I was looking at, when you were looking at my screen, I only see like 4 people. So I didn't realize you were all there. These chats, have you answered all of them, or they're? No.
All of them have been answered. Yep.
Perfect. You stayed busy, didn't you? All right. Well, thanks so much for coming tonight. I know it was a lot to throw at you, and I'm sorry for that. But this skip is something that I think if you can go ahead and start thinking about it, because you're going to need some information from your principal. And really, if you'll read the description in your rubric, Carol, you look so overwhelmed. Don't be overwhelmed. This is going to be good. It's going to be great. Read about it and then go talk to your principal or your site mentor about it. Because honestly, this is going to help them a lot. This is exactly what they do every year, and they call it a school improvement plan. The state of North Carolina has a big template to use with continuous improvement. I think South Carolina does too. Title I requires you to do this every year. So this is going to, I think, fall into place for you. It just sounds a little overwhelming right now because you don't usually work with the outside community, but it's pretty interesting to dig into it. And what you're going to find is, from a classroom teacher's perspective, you may think things are one thing, but when you start looking at the whole culture and look at it from the outside looking in, wow, it may look totally different. And you may not have any idea that's what the mindset is.
Dr. Z, quick question. For the skip, this is Angie Melton.
Yes.
For the skip, would something like an equity night be appropriate?
Be excellent.
Okay, because I'm kind of already working on that for March or April timeframe.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that that was something that I could use.
What you have to show is, you have to show why you're having that topic. What is it in your data that made you think that was a topic that you needed to address? What's your purpose? And that's what the skip is gonna present for you. Now, you don't have to implement these things either. This is just a timeline for moving forward. This is a plan. It's not something that you have to put in. You don't have to have all these nights. You just have to come up with the ideas with your team. And you have to be sure that you can afford them, that you have the people to do it. So like, you can look at student achievement, and you may find that your parents feel like you're not offering enough after-school support. So you can say, well, we're going to offer after-school tutoring 3 days a week. If you don't have the people and the money to pay for that, you can't put it in your plan. You have to show that it's feasible that you could do that.
Okay.
Now, this year, you've already spent your Title I money, but you can put it in your plan for next year and designate your money for next year. Now, do you have to do this next year? No, none of us are coming back to see if you actually did it. But
All right, that makes sense.
for you to do the experience, the experiment, for you to walk through it and have the experience of real, effective school improvement, you have to go through the motions of this. But I will be really surprised if it isn't, at least in part, used by your administrator to be a part of your continuous improvement plan for next year. And if any of you are going through accreditation, this is right on track with that too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So read over it and then you'll see if you have business partnerships and you can get some of those people on your board. If you have a school improvement team that has people serving on it that are maybe parent representatives, anything like that, that's the type of thing you're doing here. Okay? Do a good job because you're going to use that heavily in your next and final artifact, the SIAP, which comes graduation, which is coming soon next year. Okay?
Dr. Z, I know that we have parents that are supposed to be on our school improvement team, but they never come to any of the meetings. So we don't really have a way that we get parent input. So could that just be part of my plan, is how to get parents more involved? Because it's going to be difficult for me to find.
But here's the point. It's a vicious cycle, because if you don't have parents that are involved, evidently you don't know why you don't have parents that are involved. In other words, you're not the one that's not being involved. So
Yeah.
you can't guess. You're going to have to get some parents' input to find out what the problem is. So
Okay.
let me give you some suggestions. You can go to where they are. You can, you can go to a local coffee place or Walmart. Go to a church that's in your community and have a night there. They don't have to be people who come to your school, just adults who live in your community. But find if maybe school's not a safe place for somebody. Not everybody likes a school. Find a community center you could go to or something like that. Just offer a meeting. Do you have parents that are on your staff or that work in your school system? That sort of thing.
Okay.
Can you do can you do some kind of a conference call maybe? Maybe it's not convenient for them to get out. But, when I hate to keep talking about when I became a principal, the first thing they told me is parents don't come to anything here. We never have parents at anything. And they never come to PTO, never. You know when they had the PTO meetings? They had them at 2:00 in the afternoon. Now, I don't know about you, but when my kids were in school, I was working at 2:00 in the afternoon. And it was things like that I found that the people who were making the decisions were not in the heads of the people who really needed to be involved. And so once we started figuring out, some of them, it was that the school was not a welcoming place for them to be. They had bad experiences with school. So we had to kind of turn that mindset around too. And then, like I said, bicycles talked at our place. That was a big deal. So I went to Walmart and bought a few bicycles and auctioned them off. And if you weren't present, you didn't win. And if you came and dropped your ticket in the box, then we had our meeting. Then we drew who won the bicycle. So it worked. It worked. And by the time I left, we had a McDonald's night where, those community nights where you get 10%, 5%, whatever it is. That became the first thing. That was the first thing I did because I required the staff to be there. Yeah, I did. I really did. And I could do it too. It's in the contract. And the reason I did is because that was the only way that was going on their turf and making the teachers friendly in their mind. It's not that teachers weren't friendly. They were great. They wanted parents involved. But the school had an unfriendly history. And some of my parents did not have a really good personal school experience. And so they didn't want to go there. And so they had to get to know, we had to go to them, get to know them on their turf, and then bring them into ours. And so that's what it took. It took several months of once a month going to McDonald's, and everybody was required to be there an hour. And we got so big that McDonald's couldn't handle all of us. We made a lot of money too. That wasn't a bad side effect. But looking back on it and all of the school improvement papers that we've done since then and the discussions we've had, and I'm still Facebook friends with people. This was back in 2006. And I just had a parent that was PTO president when we did that post something on my Facebook page 2 days ago about that experience and just what a cultural shift that was for the entire community, and especially for when the parents felt like they owned the school again, was that experience. That, so be creative, and enjoy this. You really, this is where, as a principal, this is where you're going to change the world. You're going to make a huge difference, but you can't do it if you don't have a plan. We are teaching you the right way to do the plan. I wish I'd had this training before I became a principal, because I just sat in my chair and looked at what was wrong and wondered, oh my Lord, how do I fix this? And which do I fix first? But by doing these things, the climate analysis, the needs assessment, looking at it, you're going to know your most critical need, because that's what you're doing in that timeline. And that's one of them. That's exactly what you're saying. How can I do the plan and find out why the parents aren't here if the parents aren't here? So that's the first thing you got to figure out. Anybody else? All right, well, you've been here long enough, so go get some supper or dinner or put your feet up and relax, because, but enjoy it. And if you have any questions after you look at it, Dr. Whitaker will be with you next week, and she'll answer those. And if you have any questions in the meantime, anything I can help you with, you have some ideas, send me a message. Ask me if it's a good idea or not. And I'll tell you it all depends. No, I'll give you an answer. All right, y'all have a great night. Thanks again for coming. Take care.